Welcome back to the channel, where we examine the hidden architecture of the mind and the forces that quietly shape who we become. Here, we do not settle for surface explanations of behavior or simplified motivational slogans. Instead, we investigate the deeper psychological structures behind decision-making, identity formation, power, and self-awareness. If you are willing to question your assumptions, confront uncomfortable truths, and think at a level that very few are prepared to sustain, you are in the right place. In earlier episodes, we explored power as something that operates between people, in status hierarchies, in resentment, in social comparison. Yet perhaps Nietzsche's most radical claim is that power does not remain external, it becomes internalized. Authority migrates inward. The voice that once commanded from outside eventually speaks from within. In this episode, we investigate how the human mind constructs an internal judge, how guilt becomes a technology of self-regulation, and why much of what we call conscience may, under scrutiny, reveal itself as disciplined instinct. Part 6. The internalization of power and the birth of the inner judge. Nietzsche's argument in On the Genealogy of Morality might initially appear historical. He traces the emergence of guilt, punishment, and moral accountability through ancient social practices. Yet the deeper claim is psychological. He is attempting to reconstruct the architecture of the modern mind. The central move is this: when external aggression can no longer be expressed outwardly, it turns inward. This is not a metaphor, it is a structural claim about instinct. In pre-civilized contexts, impulses such as dominance, revenge, and territorial defense found expression through action. But as society stabilized and laws emerged, open aggression became increasingly costly. Instinct did not disappear. Instead, it was redirected. What could not be discharged outwardly was forced inward. Nietzsche names this transformation internalization. From a contemporary standpoint, one might cautiously compare this to the development of inhibitory control systems in the prefrontal cortex, which regulate impulsive behavior. Yet Nietzsche's account is less neurological and more existential. He is concerned with what happens to the human animal when instinct becomes self-policing. Aggression becomes guilt, judgment becomes conscience, punishment becomes self-criticism. The human being in his formulation becomes an animal with the right to make promises. But the cost of that right is the capacity to hold oneself accountable internally. At first glance, this might seem like moral progress. However, Nietzsche complicates the picture. He suggests that the internal judge does not merely enforce social norms, it actively reshapes identity. To understand this, consider a simple example. Imagine a person raised in an environment where ambition is subtly condemned. Perhaps success is equated with selfishness. As an adult, this person experiences a surge of motivation to pursue a competitive career path. Yet almost immediately, a counter voice emerges. You are becoming arrogant. You are betraying your roots. You are selfish. Notice what occurs psychologically. The conflict does not appear as an external debate. It feels internal, personal, moral. The individual may interpret this tension as evidence of conscience. But from a Nietzschean perspective, this voice might be understood as internalized social power. The individual is not simply deciding. He is being judged by an internal tribunal constructed from absorbed norms. Modern cognitive science provides a parallel concept in the study of self-schema and internalized standards. Research on self-discrepancy theory, for example, suggests that distress often emerges from perceived gaps between one's actual self and internalized ought selves. These oughts are rarely self-generated. They are introjected from parents, institutions, and cultural frameworks. Nietzsche's insight anticipates this by over a century. The inner judge is not purely rational, it is genealogical. It has a history. Yet Nietzsche's position is not that conscience is inherently pathological. Rather, he questions its origin and its authority. He urges us to ask, who installed this judge? In many cases, guilt functions as a mechanism of social continuity. It ensures that individuals regulate themselves even in the absence of surveillance. The remarkable efficiency of this system lies in its invisibility. Once internalized, power no longer requires enforcement. This observation intersects with later analyses by thinkers such as Michel Foucault, who examined how modern institutions produce self-regulating subjects. However, Nietzsche's approach remains more psychological than institutional. He is less interested in disciplinary systems than in the transformation of instinct into self-monitoring consciousness. Here we encounter a subtle but profound implication. If guilt originates as redirected aggression, then intense self-criticism may sometimes represent aggression misrecognized. Consider an individual who berates himself relentlessly after minor mistakes. He may interpret this as high standards or moral seriousness. Yet beneath the surface, there may be an aggressive impulse turned inward. The energy of dominance, unable to assert externally, finds expression through self-punishment. This hypothesis aligns, at least partially, with certain psychoanalytic traditions that treat the superego as both moral authority and punitive force. Yet Nietzsche's account differs in emphasis. He does not frame the inner judge primarily as a parental introject, but as the historical sediment of constrained instinct. The strategic question then becomes, how does one distinguish between self-regulation that enhances growth and self-surveillance that constrains vitality? One possible criterion lies in examining whether guilt produces paralysis or transformation. If guilt results in chronic self-doubt, inhibited action, and diminished creative output, it may function as a relic of internalized resentment. If, however, it leads to recalibration and disciplined improvement without self-contempt, it might represent integrated self-governance rather than suppressed aggression. The distinction is subtle. It requires high levels of metacognitive awareness. This brings us to self-deception. Nietzsche suggests that much of what we call moral sincerity may conceal unconscious motives. A person who publicly condemns material success might, at some level, envy those who possess it. A person who insists on humility might derive identity from moral superiority. Self-deception, in this framework, is not simply lying to oneself. It is misinterpreting the origin of one's drives. Contemporary decision science echoes this concern. Studies on motivated reasoning demonstrate that individuals often construct rational explanations for conclusions reached through emotional bias. The conscious narrative becomes post hoc justification. In this sense, the inner judge may not only punish, it may rationalize. Consider a practical scenario. Who benefits from this judgment? What instinct does it suppress? What narrative does it protect? These questions require intellectual honesty that many find destabilizing. To question one's conscience feels dangerous, even transgressive. Yet without such inquiry, autonomy remains partial. At this stage, a misunderstanding must be avoided. Nietzsche does not advocate impulsivity or nihilistic self-indulgence. Rather, he challenges the unexamined authority of inherited moral structures. The goal is not to silence the inner judge entirely, but to evaluate its legitimacy. One might describe this as the transition from heteronymous conscience to self-authored ethics. In practical terms, this involves identifying which internal standards genuinely align with one's aspirational identity, and which merely preserve historical loyalties. For example, a person committed to physical excellence, like you pursuing disciplined training despite an overnight schedule, may experience fatigue and self-criticism. Some internal pressure is necessary to maintain consistency. Yet if that pressure becomes contemptuous or identity-threatening, it ceases to function as disciplined will and begins to resemble internalized hostility. The difference lies in tone and orientation. Does the inner voice aim to strengthen or to shame? Does it facilitate growth or enforce compliance? High performers often mistake harshness for discipline. However, research on performance psychology increasingly suggests that constructive self-regulation outperforms chronic self-criticism. The latter consumes cognitive bandwidth and narrows adaptive flexibility. Nietzsche's contribution here is diagnostic. He invites us to see that what appears morally noble may conceal weakness, and what appears selfish may conceal strength. If this is true, then the architecture of the inner judge must be periodically dismantled and reconstructed. This does not occur through rebellion alone. It requires genealogical analysis of one's own beliefs. One must trace internal standards back to their origin: family, culture, trauma, admiration, resentment. Only then can one determine whether they remain strategically aligned with one's current trajectory. The individual who fails to undertake this reconstruction risks living as a divided self, governed by forces he mistakes for his own. The individual who succeeds does not eliminate tension. Rather, he integrates it. He becomes, in Nietzsche's terms, capable of self-legislation. If this exploration challenged the way you interpret your own conscience, then the inquiry has begun to do its work. In the next part, we will examine what it means to move beyond reactive morality and toward creative value formation. If you want to continue developing psychological precision, strategic self-awareness, and intellectual independence, join the channel and follow the series. The most transformative insights are rarely comfortable, but they are often necessary.